What happens when a knight's oath of loyalty collides with the most powerful force in the world? True love. When Sir Garrett Ashford knelt before King Aldwin to swear his sacred oath as a member of the Royal Guard, he pledged to place the crown above all personal desires. But the moment he laid eyes on Princess Lyanna, he realized he had made a promise that might be impossible to keep. This isn't just another story about forbidden love in a royal court. This is the incredible tale of a man torn between two kinds of honor: his sworn duty to serve his king without question, and his overwhelming love for the king's daughter. A love so pure and powerful that it would ultimately transform not just his own destiny, but the entire kingdom's future. Sir Garrett was the perfect knight, brave in battle, loyal beyond question, and destined for greatness in service to the crown. But when duty and desire went to war in his heart, he discovered that sometimes the greatest act of loyalty requires the ultimate sacrifice, and that true love doesn't always mean being together. Today I'm going to tell you the story of how one knight's impossible choice between love and duty led to a diplomatic revolution that changed the political landscape of an entire region, and how the greatest sacrifice can sometimes lead to the most unexpected rewards. But first, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? I love seeing our global community grow. And if you're ready for a story that proves real love sometimes means letting go, that duty and desire can both be honored, and that the most impossible situations can lead to the most extraordinary outcomes, smash that like button and subscribe with notifications on. Because what Sir Garrett discovered about the true meaning of loyalty will show you that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones where love transforms into something even more powerful than romance. Are you ready for a tale of honor, sacrifice, and unexpected redemption? Sir Garrett Ashford knelt in the marble throne room of Castle Ravencrest, his sword laid ceremoniously across his palms as he prepared to take the sacred oath that would bind him to King Aldwin for life. The great hall was filled with the kingdom's most distinguished nobles, all gathered to witness the elevation of the realm's most promising young warrior to the elite order of the Royal Guard. At 25, Garrett had already distinguished himself in 3 major battles against the northern barbarians, had single-handedly defended a village from raiders, and had demonstrated the kind of unwavering honor and tactical brilliance that made him legendary among both common soldiers and noble officers. The ceremony was taking place on the anniversary of the kingdom's greatest military victory, a tradition that added weight and significance to the proceedings. King Aldwin, a man of 58 years whose reign had brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to the realm, stood before his throne wearing the ceremonial armor that had been passed down through 7 generations of monarchs. His presence commanded absolute respect, not just because of his royal blood, but because of his reputation as a just ruler and skilled military strategist who had earned his authority through wisdom and decisive leadership. Sir Garrett Ashford, King Aldwin intoned, his voice carrying the authority of absolute monarchy, "Do you swear by your sacred honor, by your family name, and by your faith in the Almighty, to serve the crown with unwavering loyalty, to defend this kingdom against all enemies both foreign and domestic, and to place the welfare of the realm above your own personal desires for as long as breath remains in your body?" "I do so swear, Your Majesty," Garrett replied, his voice strong and clear as it echoed through the vaulted chamber. The words carried the weight of a vow that would define the rest of his life, binding him to a code of conduct that demanded absolute loyalty to the crown regardless of personal cost. He had prepared for this moment since childhood, dreaming of the day when he would join the ranks of knights whose names were remembered in song and story for their heroic deeds and unshakable devotion to their sovereign. King Aldwin drew his ceremonial sword, an ancient blade that had touched the shoulders of hundreds of knights over the centuries, each of whom had gone on to serve the crown with distinction. As the weapon descended to touch Garrett's right shoulder, then his left, the young knight felt the full weight of history and tradition settling upon him like a mantle. He was no longer simply a skilled warrior or a minor nobleman's son. He was now a sworn protector of the realm, bound by oaths that were considered more sacred than marriage vows or family bonds. "Rise, Sir Garrett, Knight of the Royal Guard," the king commanded, and as Garrett stood, the assembled nobles erupted in applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the ancient castle. He had achieved the highest honor available to a warrior in the kingdom, a position that carried not just prestige but enormous responsibility. As a member of the royal guard, he would be entrusted with the personal safety of the royal family, the protection of state secrets, and the enforcement of the king's will in matters both great and small. It was at that moment of triumph that Garrett's eyes fell upon Princess Lyanna, the king's only daughter, who stood beside the throne wearing a gown of midnight blue silk that seemed to capture and reflect the light of 1,000 candles. At 22, she was widely regarded as the most beautiful woman in the kingdom, but it was not her physical appearance that struck Garrett like a bolt of lightning. It was the intelligence that sparkled in her emerald eyes, the grace with which she carried herself, and the warm smile that seemed to acknowledge not just his achievement but the man himself rather than his new title. Princess Lyanna had been absent from court for the past 2 years, studying statecraft and diplomacy in the neighboring kingdom of Astoria, as part of her preparation for eventual marriage to a prince or duke who could strengthen political alliances and secure the realm's borders. Her return had been timed to coincide with this ceremony, and Garrett found himself wondering if this was mere coincidence or if there was some deeper significance to her presence at this moment of personal triumph. The princess stepped forward to offer her congratulations, as was traditional for members of the royal family when new knights were inducted into the guard. "Sir Garrett," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality that seemed to resonate in his very soul, "the kingdom is fortunate to have a warrior of your caliber sworn to its protection. I have heard remarkable stories of your courage and honor, and I look forward to the security that your service will bring to our realm." Her words were formal and appropriate to the occasion, but something in the way she spoke them, a slight emphasis on certain phrases, a particular warmth in her tone, suggested layers of meaning that went beyond mere ceremonial politeness. Garrett found himself memorizing every detail of her appearance, from the way her auburn hair caught the candlelight to the delicate silver circlet that marked her royal status, and he realized with a mixture of exhilaration and terror that his heart had already begun to belong to someone whose love was forever beyond his reach. "Your Highness honors me with her kind words," Garrett replied, bowing deeply to hide the emotions that he feared might be visible on his face. "I pledge that my service to the crown will be worthy of the trust that has been placed in me, and that the royal family's safety and well-being will be my highest priority in all things." Even as he spoke these words of loyalty and duty, he was acutely aware that he had just made a promise that might prove impossible to keep. For how could he serve the king with absolute devotion while harboring feelings for the princess that could only be described as treasonous? The weeks following Garrett's induction into the royal guard passed in a blur of intense training, ceremonial duties, and gradually increasing responsibilities that brought him into daily contact with the royal family. His assignment to Princess Lyanna's personal security detail was presented as a routine matter. She was, after all, the king's heir and therefore required constant protection from potential threats both within the castle and during her public appearances throughout the kingdom. What no one could have anticipated was how this professional arrangement would create countless opportunities for intimate conversation and shared experiences that deepened the connection between the dutiful knight and the intelligent princess. Princess Lyanna proved to be unlike any noble Lady Garrett had ever encountered during his years at court. Rather than spending her days in frivolous pursuits or social gatherings, she maintained a rigorous schedule of study and practical work that demonstrated her serious commitment to preparing for eventual rule. She read voraciously on subjects ranging from military strategy to agricultural policy, corresponded with scholars and administrators throughout the kingdom, and made regular visits to hospitals, schools, and other institutions where she could observe firsthand the challenges facing her future subjects. Garrett's role as her protector required him to accompany the princess on these excursions, and during the long hours of travel between destinations, they began to engage in conversations that revealed the depth of her intelligence and the genuine compassion that motivated her dedication to public service. She spoke knowledgeably about complex political issues, demonstrated an impressive understanding of military tactics and economics, and displayed a level of concern for the welfare of common people that was rarely seen among those born to privilege and power. "Sir Garrett," Princess Lyanna said during one of their journeys to inspect grain distribution centers in the outer provinces, "I find myself curious about your perspective on the challenges facing our border regions. You have actually fought in those areas, unlike most of my advisors who know them only from maps and reports. Do you believe the current defensive strategies are adequate to protect our people from future raids?" The question revealed not just her intellectual curiosity but her recognition that valuable insights could come from sources other than formal diplomatic channels or noble counselors. Garrett found himself speaking more freely than he had ever done with any member of the royal family, sharing his observations about terrain, local loyalties, and the tactical advantages that raiders possessed when operating in familiar territory against defenders who were stretched thin across vast distances. "Your Highness asks penetrating questions," Garrett replied, struck by her genuine interest in practical military matters that many nobles considered beneath their notice. The border defenses are adequate for repelling large-scale invasions, but they are less effective against the small, mobile groups that have been increasingly active in recent months. These raiders know the countryside intimately and can strike quickly before disappearing into terrain that is difficult for our heavier forces to pursue effectively. Their conversation continued for hours, ranging across topics that included local governance, trade relationships, and the delicate balance between central authority and regional autonomy that characterized the kingdom's administrative structure. Garrett was struck not just by the princess's knowledge but by her ability to synthesize information from multiple sources and identify connections that others might miss. She possessed the kind of strategic thinking that would serve her well as a ruler, combined with an empathy for ordinary people that suggested she would use her power wisely and compassionately. As the days passed, these professional interactions began to evolve into something more personal and emotionally charged. Garrett found himself looking forward to their conversations with an intensity that went far beyond mere duty, and he began to notice subtle signs that the princess might be developing feelings that mirrored his own growing attachment. She sought his opinion on matters that went beyond his official responsibilities, shared confidences about her hopes and concerns for the kingdom's future, and displayed a level of trust and comfort in his presence that suggested their relationship had transcended the formal boundaries that typically separated royalty from their servants. The turning point came during a particularly dangerous mission to investigate reports of bandits operating near the kingdom's eastern border. What was supposed to be a routine inspection of local defenses turned into a life-threatening situation when their small escort was ambushed by a well-organized group of raiders who had been lying in wait along the forest road. Garrett's quick thinking and superior fighting skills enabled him to protect the princess and organize an effective defense, but not before she had witnessed firsthand the violence and chaos that he faced regularly in service to the crown. In the aftermath of the attack, as they took shelter in a remote village while waiting for reinforcements to arrive, Princess Lyanna tended to a minor wound that Garrett had sustained during the fighting. The intimacy of the moment, her gentle hands caring for his injury, the concern evident in her eyes, the way she seemed to forget entirely about royal protocol in her worry for his welfare, created an emotional connection that neither of them could deny or ignore. "You saved my life today," she said quietly, her voice filled with an emotion that went far beyond gratitude for professional protection. "Not just because it was your duty, but because you care about what happens to me as a person, rather than simply as a princess whose safety you have sworn to protect." Garrett looked into her eyes and saw reflected there the same conflicted feelings that were tearing at his own heart. Love that was genuine and deep, but which could never be openly acknowledged or acted upon without devastating consequences for both of them and for the kingdom they both served. The oath he had sworn to her father demanded absolute loyalty and the suppression of any personal desires that might conflict with his duty. Yet his heart had already made choices that his mind knew were impossible to reconcile with his sworn obligations. The months that followed the ambush created an impossible tension that permeated every aspect of Garrett's service to the royal family. His professional duties required him to maintain constant proximity to Princess Lyanna, yet every moment spent in her presence intensified the emotional conflict between his sworn loyalty to King Aldwin and his growing love for the king's daughter. The irony was not lost on him that his very success as her protector, his ability to anticipate threats, his skill in ensuring her safety, his dedication to her welfare, only served to deepen the bond between them and make their impossible situation more painful. Princess Lyanna, for her part, struggled with her own conflicted emotions while maintaining the facade of royal propriety that her position demanded. Her interactions with Garrett had to appear perfectly appropriate to the dozens of courtiers, servants, and guards who observed their every public moment, yet she found herself treasuring the brief instances when they could speak privately and allow their true feelings to show through carefully chosen words and meaningful glances that conveyed what direct speech could never safely express. The situation became even more complicated when King Aldwin announced his intention to negotiate a marriage alliance with Prince Roland of Valeria, a neighboring kingdom whose military support would significantly strengthen the realm's defenses against the northern barbarian tribes that had been growing increasingly bold in their raids. The announcement was made at a grand feast attended by ambassadors from several allied kingdoms, and the political logic behind the arrangement was undeniable. Such a marriage would secure the kingdom's borders, create valuable trade opportunities, and ensure the succession through children who would unite two powerful royal bloodlines. My daughter Princess Lyanna has reached the age where marriage considerations must take precedence over personal preferences, King Aldwin declared to the assembled dignitaries, his words carrying the weight of royal decree rather than fatherly suggestion. Prince Roland of Valeria has proven himself to be a worthy ally and a man of excellent character. Their union will strengthen both our kingdoms and create a lasting foundation for peace and prosperity throughout the region. Garrett stood at his assigned position along the wall of the great hall, his face a mask of professional composure that concealed the anguish tearing at his heart as he watched the woman he loved receive news of her impending marriage to a man she had never met. Princess Lyanna's own reaction was carefully controlled, her royal training enabling her to accept the announcement with gracious dignity despite what Garrett could see were her true feelings of dismay and resignation to a fate that would forever close the door on any possibility of personal happiness. The princess's response was everything that political necessity required, accepting, dutiful, and focused on the benefits to the kingdom rather than her own preferences. I am honored by my father's confidence in my ability to serve the realm through this alliance, she said, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil that Garrett knew she must be experiencing. I trust that Prince Roland will prove to be a worthy partner in the great work of governance, and that our marriage will indeed bring the benefits that my father envisions for both our peoples. In the days that followed the announcement, Garrett found himself caught in an increasingly unbearable situation. His duties required him to help coordinate security arrangements for the upcoming diplomatic visits and marriage negotiations, forcing him to participate actively in planning events that would formalize the end of any hope for personal happiness with the woman he loved. Every detail he arranged, from escort formations to ceremonial protocols, brought him face to face with the reality that he was literally helping to orchestrate Princess Lyanna's marriage to another man. The emotional strain began to affect his performance in subtle but noticeable ways. Other members of the Royal Guard commented on his unusual preoccupation and distraction during training exercises, while court observers noted that he seemed less engaging in social situations and more withdrawn from the camaraderie that typically characterized relationships among the knights. King Aldwin himself, whose sharp eyes missed very little that occurred within his court, began to take notice of changes in the behavior of one of his most trusted protectors. The crisis came to a head during a private meeting when the king summoned Garrett to his study for what was ostensibly a routine discussion about security arrangements for the upcoming diplomatic reception. However, it quickly became apparent that King Aldwin had observed more than Garrett had realized and was prepared to address directly the situation that threatened to undermine the loyalty of one of his most valuable knights. Sir Garrett, the king began, his tone carrying the weight of absolute authority tempered by what seemed like genuine concern. I have noticed changes in your demeanor and behavior that suggest you are struggling with some personal conflict that may be affecting your ability to serve effectively. As your sovereign and as someone who values your service to the crown, I believe we should discuss whatever is troubling you so that we might find a resolution that serves both your welfare and the kingdom's needs. The directness of the king's approach left Garrett with no room for evasion or denial. He found himself faced with an impossible choice between lying to his sovereign, a betrayal of the trust that had been placed in him, and confessing feelings that could be construed as treasonous and would certainly result in his dismissal from the royal guard, exile from the kingdom, and the permanent separation from Princess Lyanna that he had been desperately trying to avoid. Your Majesty, Garrett replied, choosing his words with the care of a man walking through a field of hidden traps. I have indeed been struggling with a personal conflict that touches upon my duty to the crown. I hope that my service has remained adequate despite my internal struggles, and I assure you that my loyalty to you and to the kingdom remains absolute regardless of any personal difficulties I may be experiencing. King Aldwin studied his knight with the penetrating gaze of a ruler who had survived decades of political intrigue and personal betrayals, someone who had learned to read the truth in men's faces even when their words were carefully chosen to conceal rather than reveal. Sir Garrett, I have not lived this long or ruled this kingdom successfully by ignoring problems that could affect the stability of my court. I will ask you directly, Have you developed inappropriate feelings for my daughter that are interfering with your ability to serve both her and me with the objectivity that your position requires? The silence that followed King Aldwin's direct question seemed to stretch into eternity, as Garrett grappled with the implications of whatever answer he might give. A denial would be a lie that dishonored both his oath and his character. Yet a confession would likely mean the end of his career, his reputation, and any possibility of remaining near the woman he loved. The king's expression was unreadable, but his stillness suggested a man prepared to hear truth, regardless of how uncomfortable that truth might prove to be. "Your Majesty," Garrett began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to confess, "I have indeed developed feelings for Princess Lyanna that go beyond those appropriate to my station and my duties. I have fought against these emotions, knowing that they conflict with my oath of loyalty to you and my responsibilities as her protector, but I cannot deny their existence or claim that they have not affected my judgment and peace of mind." King Aldwin received this confession without visible surprise, suggesting that his suspicions had been well-founded and that Garrett's attempts to conceal his feelings had been less successful than he had hoped. The king moved to the window of his study, gazing out at the courtyard where knights practiced their martial skills in preparation for duties that demanded absolute dedication to the crown above all personal considerations. "Sir Garrett," the king said quietly, "do you believe that these feelings you harbor for my daughter are returned? Do you have reason to think that Princess Lyanna has developed similar attachments that might compromise her ability to fulfill her obligations to the kingdom through marriage to Prince Roland?" The question struck at the heart of Garrett's deepest fears and hopes. While he believed that Princess Lyanna's feelings mirrored his own, he had never sought explicit confirmation of this belief, partly out of respect for her position, and partly out of terror that such knowledge would make their situation even more unbearable than it already was. To suggest that the princess might be willing to sacrifice the kingdom's interests for personal happiness would be to impugn her character and dedication to duty in ways that Garrett found unthinkable. "Your Majesty, I would never presume to speak for Princess Lyanna's feelings or to suggest that she would allow personal considerations to override her commitment to serving the kingdom's best interests," Garrett replied carefully. "Whatever emotions may exist between us have never been openly acknowledged or acted upon in ways that would compromise either her honor or her dedication to her royal responsibilities." King Aldwin turned from the window to face his knight directly, his expression revealing the complex calculations of a ruler who must balance personal affections against political necessities, family loyalty against kingdom security, and the happiness of those he cares about against the demands of the crown that he would one day pass to his daughter. "The marriage alliance with Prince Roland is essential to the kingdom's security," the king stated flatly. "The northern barbarian tribes are becoming increasingly organized and aggressive, and we need Valyria's military support to maintain our borders effectively. Furthermore, this marriage will create trade opportunities that could significantly improve the economic welfare of our people. These considerations must take precedence over personal preferences, regardless of how deep those preferences might run." Garrett nodded his understanding, recognizing that the king was not being cruel or indifferent to his daughter's happiness, but was making the kind of difficult decision that rulership demanded. The welfare of thousands of subjects had to outweigh the personal desires of individuals, even when those individuals were the ruler's own family members and most trusted knights. "However," King Aldwin continued, "I am not entirely without sympathy for the situation in which you and Lyanna find yourselves. You have served the crown with exceptional dedication and honor, and my daughter has shown wisdom and maturity in fulfilling her royal duties despite personal costs. I am therefore prepared to offer you an alternative that might serve both your interests and the kingdom's needs." The king's words carried the promise of some resolution to the impossible situation, but Garrett found himself afraid to hope for anything that might seem too good to be true. Years of military service had taught him to be suspicious of offers that appeared to solve intractable problems without significant cost or compromise. "I am prepared to assign you to lead a diplomatic mission to the Eastern Kingdoms," King Aldwin announced. "This would be a position of great honor and responsibility, one that would remove you from court for approximately 2 years while Princess Lyanna adjusts to married life and establishes her new role as a wife and future mother. Upon your return, you would be eligible for promotion to a senior position that would not require daily contact with the royal family." The offer was both generous and cruel, an opportunity for advancement and distinguished service that would simultaneously solve the king's problem by removing the source of emotional conflict from his court. Garrett would retain his honor and career while being separated from the woman he loved during the most crucial period of her transition to married life, when she would need emotional support most desperately and when his presence would be most disruptive to her adjustment to her new circumstances. "Your Majesty's offer is both generous and wise," Garrett replied, understanding that this was not really a choice but a command disguised as an opportunity. "I would be honored to serve the kingdom in whatever capacity you deem most appropriate, and I recognize that such a mission would indeed serve both my personal development and the realm's diplomatic interests." King Aldwin nodded, satisfied that his knight understood both the surface meaning and the deeper implications of the arrangement. "The mission will depart within the month, immediately following Princess Lyanna's wedding ceremony. You will, of course, participate in the security arrangements for that event as your final duty in your current position. I trust that you will conduct yourself with the professionalism and dignity that has always characterized your service to the crown." The wedding preparations consumed the castle in a whirlwind of activity that seemed to mock Garrett's emotional turmoil with its celebration of an event that represented the death of his deepest hopes. Every banner hung, every flower arranged, every detail coordinated for the grand ceremony served as a reminder that he was not just witnessing but actively facilitating the marriage of the woman he loved to a man she had never chosen. His professional responsibilities required him to coordinate security protocols, review guest lists, and plan protection details with the same meticulous attention to duty that had always characterized his service, even as his heart broke a little more with each passing day. Prince Roland of Valeria arrived with great fanfare 2 weeks before the scheduled ceremony, accompanied by a retinue that demonstrated both his kingdom's wealth and its military power. He proved to be everything that political necessity could have desired: handsome, intelligent, well-educated in matters of statecraft, and genuinely committed to the alliance that his marriage to Princess Lyanna would create. Under different circumstances, Garrett might have respected and even liked the man who was clearly making every effort to be worthy of the extraordinary woman he was about to marry. The most painful aspect of the situation was watching Princess Lyanna herself navigate the complexities of her engagement with the grace and dignity that royal training had instilled in her since childhood. She was unfailingly courteous to Prince Roland, participated appropriately in the social events designed to introduce him to the court, and showed every sign of preparing conscientiously for her new role as his wife and eventual queen of Valeria. Only Garrett, who had learned to read the subtle signs of her true emotions, could detect the underlying sadness that she concealed so skillfully from everyone else. Their final private conversation took place in the castle garden during one of his routine security patrols, when chance brought them together in a secluded alcove where they could speak freely for a few precious minutes without being observed by the countless eyes that monitored every aspect of the royal family's daily activities. The moonlight illuminated her face as she turned toward him, and Garrett saw reflected in her eyes the same mixture of love and resignation that he carried in his own heart. "I know about the diplomatic mission," Princess Lyanna said quietly, her voice carrying a weight of knowledge that suggested she understood the true purpose behind what appeared to be a prestigious assignment. "Father believes that distance and time will help us both adjust to circumstances that cannot be changed, and perhaps he is correct. The heart sometimes accepts what the mind knows to be necessary, even when that acceptance comes at great personal cost." Garrett struggled to find words that could adequately express the depth of his feelings while remaining appropriate to their situation and their respective duties. "Your Highness, serving as your protector has been the greatest honor of my life, not just because of my oath to the crown but because of the privilege of knowing the remarkable woman you are. Your wisdom, your compassion, your dedication to the welfare of our people. These qualities will make you an exceptional queen regardless of which kingdom you rule." "And you," she replied, stepping closer despite the risk of being observed, "have shown me what true honor looks like when it is lived rather than merely proclaimed. Your loyalty to my father, your protection of me, your commitment to placing duty above personal desire. These are the qualities that make you worthy of far more than life has offered you. I want you to know that what I feel for you is genuine and deep, and that reality will remain true regardless of whatever else the future may require." The confession they had both avoided making explicit hung in the air between them, acknowledged finally but still unable to change the fundamental realities that governed their lives. They loved each other deeply and genuinely, But that love could not overcome the political necessities that demanded Princess Lyanna's marriage to Prince Roland or the social barriers that made any other outcome impossible to contemplate. I will carry the memory of our time together as a treasure that makes whatever exile I face bearable, Garrett said, allowing himself the luxury of complete honesty for perhaps the last time in his life. And I will serve the kingdom with redoubled dedication, knowing that every victory I achieve in your father's name somehow serves you as well, even if from great distance. Princess Lyanna reached out to touch his hand briefly, a gesture so fleeting that anyone observing might have dismissed it as accidental contact, but which conveyed more emotion than hours of conversation could have expressed. Promise me that you will find happiness in your new role, that you will not allow our impossible situation to prevent you from building a life worthy of the remarkable man you are. The kingdom needs your talents, and you deserve to use them in service of causes that bring you satisfaction and fulfillment. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of other members of the court, forcing them to resume the formal distance that their respective positions required. As they separated, Garrett felt the finality of the moment settling over him like a shroud, understanding that while they might see each other again at official functions, they would never again have the opportunity for the kind of intimate conversation that had just ended. The wedding ceremony itself was magnificent in every detail, a celebration worthy of the political importance of the alliance it formalized and the personal happiness it was supposed to represent. Princess Lyanna was radiant in her wedding gown, every inch the beautiful bride that royal protocol demanded, while Prince Roland appeared genuinely moved by the solemnity of the vows they exchanged before the assembled nobility of two kingdoms. Garrett stood with the other members of the royal guard, his face a perfect mask of professional detachment as he watched the woman he loved pledge her life to another man. As the ceremony concluded and the celebration began, Garrett felt a strange sense of relief mixed with his profound sadness. The impossible tension that had defined his existence for months was finally resolved, not in the way he had hoped but in the only way that circumstances had ever allowed. His duty was clear, his path forward was established, and while the cost was enormous, he could at least move forward with the knowledge that he had served both his king and his princess faithfully, placing their welfare above his own desires, even when that service demanded the sacrifice of his personal happiness. The diplomatic mission to the Eastern Kingdoms proved to be exactly what King Aldwin had intended, an opportunity for Garrett to channel his exceptional talents into challenging work that required complete focus and dedication, leaving little time for dwelling on personal losses or impossible dreams. The assignment was far more complex and dangerous than Garrett had initially realized, involving delicate negotiations with rulers who were suspicious of outside influence, navigation of ancient territorial disputes, and the establishment of trade agreements that required both diplomatic finesse and occasional displays of military strength. Over the course of 18 months, Garrett distinguished himself as more than just a skilled warrior. He proved to be a natural diplomat whose combination of honor, intelligence, and genuine respect for other cultures enabled him to succeed where more traditionally trained ambassadors had failed. His reports back to King Aldwin detailed not just successful treaty negotiations but innovative approaches to conflict resolution that had potential applications throughout the kingdom's foreign relations. The work was demanding enough to occupy both his days and his thoughts, but could not entirely erase the memory of the woman he had left behind, or his concern for her welfare in her new life as Queen of Valeria. Occasional diplomatic dispatches brought news of Princess Lyanna's adjustment to married life, her growing reputation as a wise and compassionate queen, and the successful strengthening of military alliances that her marriage had created. Each piece of information brought both comfort and renewed sadness. Comfort in knowing that she was fulfilling her destiny successfully, sadness in being reminded of his permanent separation from her. The turning point in Garrett's emotional recovery came during a particularly difficult negotiation with a tribal confederation that had been raiding settlements along the kingdom's eastern border. Rather than relying on military threats or economic pressure, Garrett chose to live among the tribes for several months, learning their customs and understanding the grievances that had motivated their aggressive actions. His willingness to show respect for their culture and to address legitimate concerns about water rights and grazing lands led to a peaceful resolution that transformed former enemies into trading partners and allies. This success brought Garrett to the attention of rulers throughout the eastern region, who began seeking his counsel on their own diplomatic challenges and inviting him to mediate disputes that had festered for decades. He discovered that he possessed not just an aptitude for this work but a genuine passion for the complex puzzle of international relations and the satisfaction that came from creating solutions that benefited all parties involved. Word of Garrett's achievements eventually reached King Aldwin through multiple channels, painting a picture of a knight who had not merely fulfilled his assigned duties but had exceeded all expectations in ways that brought honor to the kingdom and created valuable new relationships throughout the region. The king's pride in his former guard's accomplishments was evident in the increasingly important assignments that were dispatched to him, each carrying greater responsibility and trust. As the second year of his mission drew to a close, Garrett received a summons to return to the capital for consultations about establishing a permanent diplomatic presence in the Eastern Kingdoms. The message was formal and professional, but carried undertones suggesting that King Aldwin was considering offering him a position that would utilize his proven talents in ways that served both his personal development and the kingdom's expanding international interests. The journey home was filled with mixed emotions as Garrett contemplated his return to a court that had been forever changed by his absence and by events that had unfolded during his time away. Princess Lyanna was now firmly established in her role as Queen of Valeria, likely settled into married life and perhaps even beginning a family that would secure the alliance through the next generation. The passionate young woman who had captured his heart would still exist, but would now be layered over with new experiences, responsibilities, and loyalties that had moved her even further beyond his reach. Garrett's homecoming was marked by ceremonies appropriate to a returning hero whose service had brought honor to the kingdom and concrete benefits to its security and prosperity. King Aldwin received him in private audience, expressing personal satisfaction with his achievements and outlining plans for future diplomatic initiatives that would require someone with his unique combination of skills and experience. "Sir Garrett," the king said with evident pride, "your service in the Eastern Kingdoms has exceeded my highest expectations. You have not only fulfilled the immediate objectives of your mission but have created opportunities for expanded cooperation that will benefit the realm for generations to come. I am prepared to offer you a permanent position as ambassador to the Eastern Kingdoms, with authority to negotiate treaties and resolve disputes on behalf of the crown." The offer represented everything that Garrett could have hoped for in terms of professional advancement and personal fulfillment. The position would allow him to continue work that he found deeply satisfying while serving the kingdom in ways that utilized his talents to their fullest extent. It would also, he realized, provide an honorable way to remain at a distance from the royal court and avoid the emotional complications that proximity to Princess Lyanna might create. "Your Majesty's confidence in my abilities is deeply gratifying," Garrett replied, "and the opportunity to serve the kingdom in this capacity would indeed be a great honor. I accept your offer with gratitude and pledge to continue serving the crown with the same dedication that has always guided my actions." As he spoke these words of acceptance, Garrett felt a sense of peace settling over him for the first time in years. He had found a path forward that honored both his duty to the crown and his own need for meaningful work, a resolution that allowed him to serve the woman he loved by serving the kingdom she would one day rule, even if that service required permanent separation from her presence. 5 years after his appointment as ambassador to the Eastern Kingdoms, Garrett returned to the capital for the celebration of King Aldwin's 30th anniversary on the throne, an event that brought together dignitaries from across the known world to honor a ruler whose reign had brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to the region. The knight who had once struggled with divided loyalties now carried himself with the confidence and authority of a seasoned diplomat whose achievements had earned respect throughout the international community. The castle corridors that had once been the stage for his personal torment now felt like a familiar but distant memory as Garrett moved through them with the easy bearing of a man who had found his true calling. His success as an ambassador had created a new identity that, while built upon the foundation of his knightly training, had evolved into something uniquely his own. He was no longer defined primarily by his oath to serve others, but by his proven ability to create solutions that served the greater good while honoring the legitimate interests of all parties involved. The reunion with King Aldwin took place in the same study where Garrett had once confessed his impossible love for the king's daughter, but the conversation that unfolded bore no resemblance to that painful earlier encounter. Instead, it was a discussion between equals, a wise ruler and his most trusted representative, about the complex challenges facing the kingdom and the opportunities that skillful diplomacy might create to address them. "Garrett," the king said, using the informal address that reflected their evolved relationship, Your work in the East has transformed our strategic position in ways that I could never have imagined when I first sent you away. The trade routes you have established have brought prosperity to regions that were once economically isolated, while the alliances you have forged have created a network of mutual support that makes aggression against any member economically and militarily unfeasible. The recognition was gratifying, but what pleased Garrett most was the understanding that his work had contributed to the kind of stable, peaceful world that Princess Lyanna had always envisioned. Every successful negotiation, every conflict prevented, every partnership created had been motivated not just by duty to the crown but by a desire to build the kind of kingdom that would be worthy of the remarkable woman who would one day rule it, even if she would do so from a different throne in a different land. The anniversary celebration itself was a magnificent affair that showcased the kingdom's prosperity and the respect it commanded among its neighbors. Representatives from dozens of allied kingdoms filled the Great Hall, their presence a testament to the diplomatic success that had characterized King Aldwin's reign and the bright future that seemed to stretch ahead under continued wise leadership. It was during this celebration that Garrett encountered Princess Lyanna for the first time in over 5 years, though she now bore the title of Queen Lyanna of Valeria, and carried herself with the mature confidence of a woman who had successfully navigated the transition from princess to ruling queen. She was more beautiful than ever, but it was a beauty enhanced rather than defined by her obvious contentment and the wisdom that came from years of effective leadership. Their meeting was formal and public, conducted with all the ceremony appropriate to an encounter between a queen and an ambassador, but Garrett could see in her eyes a warmth that acknowledged their shared history and the bond that had once existed between them. She had clearly found fulfillment in her role as queen, and while Garrett could detect no unhappiness in her manner, he sensed that she remembered their time together with the same mixture of fondness and melancholy that he carried in his own heart. "Ambassador Garrett," Queen Lyanna said during their formal introduction, "your reputation as a skilled diplomat has reached even our court in Valeria. The agreements you have negotiated have benefited not just this kingdom but all the allied realms that depend on eastern trade routes for their prosperity. My father speaks of you with great pride, and rightly so." "Your Majesty is too kind," Garrett replied, bowing with the respect due to her station while allowing himself to remember, briefly, the young woman who had once tended his wounds after a bandit attack and spoken to him about her dreams for the kingdom's future. "I am honored that my small contributions to regional stability have met with approval from one whose own achievements in statecraft have become legendary throughout the diplomatic community." Their conversation was brief and entirely appropriate to their public setting, but it served to confirm what Garrett had hoped, that Princess Lyanna had indeed found her destiny as a wise and effective ruler, that her marriage had brought her not just political alliance but genuine partnership with a man who clearly respected and supported her abilities, and that the sacrifice of their personal happiness had indeed served the greater good in ways that justified the pain it had caused. Later that evening, as the celebration continued with music and dancing that filled the castle with joy, Garrett found himself standing on the same balcony where he had once taken his oath as a member of the royal guard. The young knight who had knelt in the throne room 6 years earlier seemed like a different person now, someone whose understanding of loyalty, duty, and service had been tested and refined through experiences that had ultimately strengthened rather than broken him. King Aldwin joined him on the balcony, carrying 2 goblets of wine and the satisfied expression of a ruler who could look back on decades of successful leadership with genuine pride. "You know," the king said thoughtfully, "when I sent you away, I believed I was solving a problem that threatened the stability of my court and the happiness of my daughter. I never imagined that I was actually providing you with the opportunity to become the man you were meant to be." Garrett accepted the wine with a smile that reflected the peace he had found in his current life. "Your Majesty's wisdom has always extended beyond immediate circumstances to encompass longer-term consequences that others might not foresee. The path you set me on has indeed led to fulfillment that I could never have imagined when I was consumed by impossible desires and conflicted loyalties." "And Lyanna?" the king asked quietly. "Do you believe she has found similar contentment in the life that duty required her to accept?" Garrett looked back toward the great hall, where Queen Lyanna could be seen in animated conversation with Prince Roland and several other rulers, her obvious intelligence and warmth making her the center of attention in any gathering she joined. "I believe she has become exactly the leader she was born to be, Your Majesty. Her happiness may not be the same as what she once imagined for herself, But it is real, and substantial, and well-deserved. The king nodded, satisfied that the difficult decisions he had made years earlier had indeed served everyone's best interests, even when those decisions had required short-term pain and sacrifice from people he cared about deeply. The kingdom was stronger, his daughter was fulfilled in her role as a queen, and his former knight had found a calling that utilized his talents in service of causes larger than any individual desires. As the evening drew to a close, Garrett prepared to return to his diplomatic duties in the Eastern kingdoms, knowing that he would likely see Princess Lyanna only rarely in the years to come, and then only at formal state occasions where their interactions would be limited to the ceremonial courtesies appropriate to their respective positions. But he also knew that he would carry with him always the memory of the love they had shared, not as a source of regret but as a reminder of the power of genuine emotion to inspire people to become their best selves even when circumstances prevented that emotion from finding its intended expression. The story of Sir Garrett Ashford had become one of service transcending personal desire, of loyalty that was ultimately proved not by blind obedience but by the wisdom to choose the greater good even when that choice required enormous personal sacrifice. His love for Princess Lyanna had not been conquered or forgotten, but had been transformed into a deeper commitment to creating the kind of world she deserved to rule, a world where diplomacy could prevent conflicts, where different cultures could cooperate for mutual benefit, and where the ideals of honor and service could be lived out in ways that benefited everyone rather than serving only the narrow interests of those with power.